Good morning. I am Howard. Today is June 10th. Happy June, and this is going to be the beginning of my June wrap up. So, what happened was I finished two books on the 8th and then one book yesterday on the 9th. So, I'm going to talk about all of those today on the 10th because I didn't talk about them on those days. The first book I finished in June was The Witch King by H.E. Edgemon. I have been waiting for this book to come out for months. It came out on June 1st. I put it on hold as soon as it came out at my library, and I got it. I listened to the audiobook of it, and it was just, oh, it was incredible. It was everything I wanted it to be. It is about this teen boy named Wyatt. He's trans, and he is a witch who comes from a magical realm where there are fae and there are witches. Fae are the upper class and witches are the lower class, and he runs away from this kingdom into the human world where he is planning to just live out the rest of his life. But everything changes when his fiance, the person he's betrothed to, a member of the fae, comes to the human world, finds him, and drags him back to the world of the fae. This book was incredible. All of the characters reminded me of how me and my friends were in high school. They're all angry and stupid, and I just loved them a lot. I saw a lot of myself in this book, and this was 5 stars for me. I am so upset that this is the first book in a series, and the second book isn't going to come out for another year and a half. Very unfortunate, because of course I wanted to read this as soon as it came out, but I also probably should have waited until closer to the second book. But do you know what? I can just read it again when the second book is about to come out, and that's going to be fun for me. So I think I think this was a good decision. I'll just have to read it again. Yeah. The second book I read, I also listened to on audio. It was the Subtweet by Vivek Shraya. I was visiting my parents in New Jersey and I had to drive home. The drive was about 4 hours and the audiobook was the perfect length. It is about two women who are musicians. One is more of like a niche kind of underground musician. She's kind of very critical and more pessimistic isn't really the right word, but like she's more like hardened by the industry. And the second woman is more of like a traditional pop style artist, and she covers one of the first woman's songs, which just becomes so incredibly popular. Like the first woman's song had never been heard of until she covered it, and then suddenly like hundreds of thousands of people are listening to this song. And so these two women meet and they become friends, and it is about their relationship, and they become friends really quickly, and then they're kind of torn apart by the different paths that their careers are taking. And I thought this was just a really beautiful, well written book. It kept my attention for the entire drive. There wasn't ever a point where I was like, okay, I've had enough of this. I want to stop listening to it. It really held my attention for my entire drive, which is honestly pretty impressive. It wasn't like the perfect book for me, but I really, really enjoyed it. There was also some really casual trans rep. One of the women is trans, and it's mentioned like once or twice kind of in passing. And I just thought that was really cool to just have a trans person existing in a story without it being about them being trans. And yeah, I really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. The final book that I read, I finished yesterday. I've been reading for a couple weeks, is the Greenwood Histories of the Modern Nations, The History of Vietnam by Justin Corfield. This is a textbook. This is a history textbook that I borrowed from the library. I took an Asian American literature class last semester, and we read a book from a Vietnamese author, and I realized that I went to public school in America, and I knew nothing about Vietnam, and what I did know was incorrect. And so I wanted to fix that, and I thought the best way to educate myself would just be to pretend I was taking a class and read a textbook, which is what this is. And it was a textbook, it was pretty dry, but I think I gained some good information. I definitely know more now than I did before, I'm not an expert on the field, so I don't know how correct any of this is, but I'm gonna assume it is correct. Of course, there was, bias because it was written by a Western author, and so anytime he was talking about the communists, they were, violent or threatening or whatever, and anytime he was talking about the anti-communists, they were, heroic or peaceful or whatever, which I just kind of expected based on who wrote this and who it is written for. Also, there was just a lot of like little typos in here. Like a lot of times the tense was weird. Like he meant to say begins, but instead he say began, and just little things like that kind of took me out of the learning experience because I was just catching them a lot. But overall, I don't know. It was a textbook. I guess I will rate it 3 stars. Despite me wearing the same shirt as I was in the last clip, it is in fact the next day. It's the 11th, and I finished Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. This is a YA contemporary novel about a young Puerto Rican lesbian in New York City, and she reads this book by a white lesbian, a feminist. It's the first exposure she has to feminism, and she just is completely enamored with it. She reaches out to the author, who offers her a summer internship, and she goes and does that internship. And it's about her kind of coming into her identity as a feminist, learning about queer culture, learning about intersectionality, and kind of realizing that the white feminism that the woman that she idolizes is preaching is not necessarily the best form of feminism or the most inclusive or the most feminist. And while she does come to realize this in the end, there are a bunch of like smaller things that, because she's still seeing the white feminist through rose-colored glasses, that kind of get overlooked, specifically like racial stereotyping and some turf nonsense like conflating womanhood with vaginas. I think I would have really liked this book if I was younger, if I had read it when I was in high school, if I hadn't yet realized that white feminism was not the only type of feminism. But because I am farther along in my journey, and just the amount of time that was spent idolizing and worshiping this specific type of white feminism, I found it quite boring. I wish it was shorter, and Juliet, the main character, could have come into her own a little faster, but I am not really the audience for this book, so like it's okay. I also want to talk about the fact that it has, in my opinion, really good disability rep. Juliet has asthma, and it's just like a normal part of her character and her story. Considering how many people I know in real life that have asthma, I am shocked that I've never read a book where a character has asthma before. So it was honestly really refreshing to just see a character with asthma just living her life. Overall, even though this book took me like a month to get through because I found it kind of slow, I did really like it, and I do think it's definitely worthwhile for anyone who's interested in it. I just wish I had read it when I was younger. I gave it 3 stars.
Yeah, I think that's just how my hair looks today. What's up? As you can see, new day, new shirt. It's the 13th. And I just finished listening to the audiobook for Becoming Eve, My Journey from Ultra-Orthodox Rabbi to Transgender Woman by Abby Chava Stein. It's pretty obvious what this is from the title. It's basically her memoir about her childhood and her experience realizing that she was a trans woman. It was pretty solid. Didn't really stand out in any way to me. I thought it was generally well written, very well paced. She mainly focuses on her like childhood and adolescence. She comes out in the epilogue to her family and begins her life, and so we don't really get to see how she lives her life after she comes out. We just see what the before is, but other than that, it was a really solid read. She narrated the audiobook herself, which was a really interesting time, and overall, I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars.
Good morning. Happy Monday. It's the 14th. As you can tell by my sexy collared shirt, I'm dressed for work, which is fitting because the book I just finished is one that I had to read for work. If you saw last month's wrap up, you'll know that I started a new job and my boss asked me to read a couple business books because he likes them and uses the terminology from them, and so I did. The one I just finished, I listened to on audiobook, and that was Getting More by Stuart Diamond. This was by far my least favorite book of any of the books I had to read for this job. His tips were fine, pretty much the same as the other two books about how to negotiate and how to not get 100%, but to get more, as the title implies, in every situation in your life. $1 less adds up over time, that sort of thing. The thing that I hated about this book was the examples he gave, which were problematic at best. So, like in the first chapter, he said his tip was don't make generalizations about people. That's a good tip. There are plenty of situations in which it would be good not to make generalizations about a group of people. He used the example of Nazis. He said, if you made a blanket statement, all Nazis are bad, that would be including people who were only Nazis in name, who were only pretending to be Nazis so that they could actually help Jewish and marginalized people during the Holocaust. You can imagine the other types of things he was saying. Just a real stand-up type of guy, So I am thrilled to not be reading this anymore. That was a fat 2 stars from me on this one.
It's the 16th. It's almost midnight. I'm about to go to bed, but I just finished listening to the audiobook of The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This is about a society where things just disappear from your memory. So, like, things like ribbon or perfume or a harmonica. The object stops making sense in context. You forget what it is or that it ever existed. Like the physical object still exists, and everyone kind of just agrees to get rid of them because they don't mean anything anymore. There are some people in the society who don't forget. That is seen as dangerous. And so people called the memory police locate the people who don't forget and remove them from society. So the kind of inciting incident for this book is one of the main character's coworkers tells her that he is one of the people who does not forget, and she decides to hide him in her home and try to protect him from the memory police. That's kind of all I want to say about this book. I thought it was pretty solid. I gave it 4 stars. I think if I said anything more about it, that would be spoiling it. I thought it was really beautifully written. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say.
I'm back. It's the 18th. I read a book for school called The Amistad Rebellion by Marcus Rediker. It was about the Amistad Rebellion. I'm taking a class about famous American trials. I don't rate books for school. It was just a history book. It was fine.
Hello, it's the 19th, and I'm standing in this cliff because I think my outfit is really good. Anyway, I wanted to tell you about One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, which I just finished. I read this as an audiobook, and I really think I set myself up on this one because Red, White, and Royal Blue by the same author is one of my comfort books. And so I had been hyping up Casey McQuiston has another book, Casey McQuiston has another book, the whole time, knowing that it was a romance book, number one, and knowing that I don't like romance books, number two. And so I was very excited to read it. I read it really close to when it came out, and I didn't like it because I don't generally like romance books, which I should have known about myself. I should have predicted this. If I hadn't had all these expectations going into it, I think I would have had a much better time, but I didn't. I had so many expectations and I let myself down, and I think that's my fault. This is a romance between two women, one named August, who moves to New York for college, and the other named Jane, who is kind of stuck out of time. She there's like a little mystery about that where she's only able to be on the subway, and also she's from the 70s. August has a bunch of friends that she makes in New York City. I didn't really feel like they were super fleshed out. I didn't really feel like connected to any of them, so that was also kind of disappointing. And there's a romance and they like love each other. I hope that's not a spoiler because this is a romance novel, so I didn't really care about it because I don't typically care about if people are in love or not. Oh well. So yeah, that's my take. I didn't like it, but it's my fault, I think, because this book did a romance and I think it did it fine. I just don't care. So like I didn't like it, but I think the book's good anyway. So we are landing on a firm 3 stars because like I don't know. It was fine. I did kind of hate it, but like it's probably my own fault. But like I didn't hate it. It's good. If you like romance, then you might like it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying.
I don't know anything.
What's up? It's the 23rd. I have 2 announcements. Number 1, I finished this book, The Great New Orleans Kidnapping Case, Race, Law, and Justice in the Reconstruction Era by Michael Ross. I read this for class, obviously. Guess who is teaching the class? Michael Ross. Yes, the professor assigned us his own book, and I had to buy it with my own money. I don't really care about the contents of this book. It's about the Great New Orleans Kidnapping Case. I read it, mostly. I really skimmed that last 80 pages. Secondly, and much more excitingly, I crocheted a little wrap. It's a triangle, like a little throw to put on the back of my chair in the winter when it's cold. So I can because I get cold really easily, so I'll just keep it on the back of my chair and then just wrap myself up in it just like this. Good morning. Happy Thursday. Thursday the 24th. I finished Bad Girls Don't Die by Katie Alender. I read it as an audiobook. Why did I read this? Because I saw the book trailer for it starring Zendaya in 2015, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. No further explanation needed for that. It is about a girl named Alexis who has a pretty normal life. She's a bit of an outcast at school. Her parents are having parent issues, and everything is kind of normal, and then her sister starts acting really weird, and she thinks it might be some sort of supernatural possession. I was highly entertained by this book. I thought it was fast and fun. It did talk about suicide in a way that I didn't love, but overall, I thought it was a good time. I gave it 4 stars, and I'm very much going to continue with the series because what the fuck else am I going to do with my life?
This is the 29th. I feel disgusting. I just took a nap all day, but before that, I finished the audiobook of From Bad to Cursed by Katie Alender. This is the sequel to Bad Girls Don't Die. I liked it about the same as Bad Girls Don't Die. I thought that it was both more interesting and less fun than the first one, because in the first one, the supernatural thing was happening to someone else. You were in the head of a main character who was wondering what was going on, whereas in the second book, the main character is the one who is possessed by a supernatural thing, and so you're reading her interaction and possession of this thing, and I wasn't super into that perspective. I think I preferred when she was trying to like figure out what was going on instead of it actually happening to her. There were 2 things I didn't like about this book that I think were poorly done. Number 1, there was a disabled character who was magically cured by the supernatural thing. At the beginning of the book, she uses a cane, she has a degenerative disease, and there's a lot of ableism going on about her, how she's such a loser, whatever. and when the supernatural possession takes place, she is magically cured of that disease, or she doesn't need to use the cane anymore. We don't see her after the supernatural thing goes away at the end. We don't know if she goes back to being disabled or not, and I really didn't like that. And the second thing is that there's one person of color in this book that is like on page a person of color, and she is only described as a gypsy. She is the reason that the supernatural possession takes place because she's like tricky and uses black magic, and it's super not good. It's super not good. She also gets murdered so that the white girls can take possession of the supernatural thing. It's a mess, to be honest, but I don't know, looking past those two things that I really didn't like, the book is fun. These are fun books, the like 2012 era of like YA fantasy. I get it. You can just kind of like turn your brain off. I'm going to read the last book in this series probably next month. It is July 1st, which means this is the final update for this vlog. I finished my last book of the month yesterday, the 30th, and that was Conspiracy in the Streets. This was ooh, compiled by John Wiener. It was a transcript of the trial of the Chicago 7, which was basically about what was supposed to be a peaceful protest, but then became a riot after police intervention. I really liked this book. This book kind of just gave an introduction, some setup to the trial, and then it was just excerpts from the transcripts. There was originally like 22,000 pages of transcripts. This was like a 300-page book, so it cut it down drastically to just the really interesting parts. And I really liked this book. It read really easily, like a play or like a courtroom debate, because this is what they actually said. This is what actually happened. And this was definitely my favorite book that I had to read for this class that I am glad is going to be over in a week. But yeah, that's all for June. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time.